my name is Leon DeVries, for those who don't know, and I'm the project lead on the Energy Partnership. Thank you all for coming today. I'm so pleased that we have a full house here today. Today's session is really the first of the kind of the new workshop series that the Energy Partnership is hosting every 2 months, and it's being hosted by Energy Partners for Energy Partners. And I won't go into too much detail on the Energy Partnership program itself, but anybody who's kind of new to the program, we have a number of materials for your perusal. And also, if you are actually here as a new business member or organization, we also have a little bit of an info kit. So please speak with me today before the end so that I can pass that on to you. So this is our workshop schedule here. We had our first session in late September, which was more about orientation and figuring out how we want to work together and what some of the themes and topics of interest are to the partnership. Today is our first content-heavy session on the topic of solar energy. So by popular demand, people filled in a sheet that we had on what kind of topics may interest your business, your organization, your clients, even you personally, and solar definitely drifted to the top. So I'm very pleased to bring in a very qualified speaker on that today. The next series of workshops are planned out in terms of date for 2017, but the topics haven't been assigned yet. So today we're going to do a little bit more question and answer with you around what kind of topics you would find to be of most interest, and then we'll schedule those in. So these are the topics that rose to the top of those who responded to the survey that we did. So energy financing and funding opportunities, as well as energy markets and business development opportunities, were probably the two that received the most interest from our partner members. Beyond that, some specific sort of technology or kind of aspects of energy included general efficiency, heating and cooling, solar, which we're covering today, energy storage, and then also energy poverty and social challenges, so kind of the human dimension of the energy challenge that we're facing. So the way that the coordination team is interpreting this is that what we may do is focus each of the sessions on an energy topic and then make sure that we cover energy financing and funding within each of those topics, right? Rather than just doing a whole session just on general financing and funding. So anyway, we're playing a bit with the ideas that are here, and we'd love a little bit more of your feedback on how you would like to see those topics delivered in 2017. Anyway, and if there is a request by popular demand to bring solar back, we can see if Dr. Grosco would come back for another session, or maybe we'll get someone else in. So if there is, we can even do subjects twice if there's more content to cover. So the way we've generally thought about structuring these is that we'll break our workshops. We have 2 hours into 2 sections. The first section will be the workshop topic of focus. Today that will be solar energy by Dr. Wayne Grosco. We have provided for you on your tables a worksheet, and the first page of that worksheet is a way for you to record some of your notes and ideas, and we're actually asking the speaker or the workshop host to kind of go through some of that content, the way your notes are arranged, so that you can kind of follow along and take any notes that may be of interest. So that's the first full page of your sheet, so front and back side. And then the second page is some additional discussion we'll do later. After about a half, if anyone doesn't have a sheet, please let Bernice know. I think we have a few extras sticking around. We'll then do Q&A and open it up for discussion. And as part of that, it would be really great if we could focus a little bit also on some local examples and some local stories that are happening here. So we'll tap your brains for that. And then we'll go into a networking break for 20 minutes, so we can have open conversation, meet other people in the room, have a chat with Wayne and other folks around. And then we'll get into the last 40 minutes or so will be on topics of discussion that are relevant to the partnership program. So today we'll be giving you an update on the Living Energy Laboratory. We'll have a discussion on growing the partnership and who else we can reach out to and bring into what we're doing. And we were going to do a short survey for you, but we decided to bump that into an online environment in order to save some time. So that's what's happening on our agenda today, and that's the general format for our sessions. So, without any further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Cameron.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Cameron Cochran. I'm one of the energy partners. We represent Bridgewater Farmstead. I'm pleased to announce today's speaker, Dr. Wayne Browski. He's a consultant, researcher, project developer, and teacher with 13 years of experience in sustainable energy. He works as renewable energy coordinator with the Ecology Action Centre. He's on the board of directors of Solar Nova Scotia and is president of the Community Energy Co-op. He's taught sustainability and energy at Dalhousie University and the Nova Scotia Community College. His current work is on helping community organizations in Nova Scotia develop solar energy projects for the building. So without any further, I'd like to introduce Dr. Wayne Browski.
Thank you for the kind introduction. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are y'all doing this morning? Good. I'll be short and sweet. I actually followed. Leon told me in advance these sort of worksheet and questions you'd be following, so I kind of followed that, which is fun. Yeah. And I'm actually, well, you know a little bit about my experience from my introduction, but I was going to ask just briefly about the experience in the room. So how many folks here have been involved or done some kind of solar energy project or worked on something related to solar energy? Okay, quite a number. Just say one or two briefly. What's your involvement in solar energy?
We install thermodynamics, solar hot water panels.
Okay, great. There's pictures of them in here.
Yeah.
That's with Naughty Group?
Yeah.
Okay. And maybe one other, somebody else has a hand?
We had thermodynamics for domestic.
Okay, great. So there's several experiences with that. So I'll jump right into it. My title is 3 Ways to Use Solar Energy. I noticed the worksheet was all about threes. I had 3 questions, 3 this, 3 that. So I said, I'll do 3 ways to use solar energy at your building. Now that's the focus here is at a building. So that could be a home. It could be a single family dwelling. It could be anything up to an industrial facility, a brewery, a municipal building. But at that building, how are you going to be able to use solar energy? And I like to start with this picture. This is also an NSCC facility at the Middleton campus of the Nova Scotia Community College. Has anyone ever been to this building? Okay, great, at least one. So this is called Billikin House. It's a fantastic example of an energy efficient and solar supply design. And it was built by the Nova Scotia Community College as a teaching and learning laboratory. And the reason I use it as a photo is it actually shows all 3 of the ways of using solar energy in one single picture. And they are, heat the space. Heating the space inside our buildings is actually one of our largest users of energy in this province, in our cold winter climate. And this building, and we'll go into more of the details later, but it's essentially built like a big solar collector, the whole building, to capture the sun. So that side is facing south. That's even why it's a little bit off the angle of the street network, as you can kind of see. Is to face south so that the winter sun can come right in those windows. And because this building is so well insulated, the sun that comes in those windows is a significant part of the heating load, thus taking load off of the heat pump, which is here. Which of course the heat pump is also a great way to get your heating, but it doesn't have to run very much because in winter, the winter sun is heating that building. So that's one example. And that's called passive solar design, which is what we'll talk about a bit more in a moment. Heating water. So several of you are familiar, that is a thermodynamic solar water heater at the top. So we'll see closer views of those and talk a bit more about how they work. And making electricity. And those are the 3 ways that I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail. Just to give you the context here, my friend Caitlin, who was visiting this building, is in this photo in part to show you what the weather was like that day. This is a winter picture. And that building, on sunlight, sun energy alone, was warm enough to be comfortable with because of that solar energy. So there's our three ways: heat the interior space, heat water, and make electricity. I spoke a little bit about how that's done in this building. Just to emphasize, the walls are this thick. They're double stud construction with dense packed cellulose insulation. Double stud meaning there's a 2x4 stud wall here, and there's a 2x4 stud wall here, and the entire space is full of insulation. What that does is eliminate what you call the thermal bridge, which is the heat passing through the studs. Amazing construction, and there's lots more buildings starting to be built like that. Most of the windows are double glazed. We even managed to afford a couple of triple glazed windows, and the airtightness is sealed very, very well. So those are the basic principles, and I'll go over those again with another example, a little how-to guide here. This picture is the most energy efficient house in New Brunswick, and it's near Fredericton. Climate actually a little bit colder than here, and the heating bill for this house is $77 per year. So in the winter, it costs $77 to heat this home. It's a 1,500 square foot home. And how do they do that? They follow the passive house principles. I was going to say that $77 is electric heat. It's just a basic electric heater, actually in the ventilation system that provides the backup heat for this home. And it sort of points out that if you make the home that energy efficient, it doesn't really matter exactly what you heat it with, because whatever you heat it with is going to cost very, very little. But you can sort of see it if you look at the picture, and it may be hard to see where you are, but I can tell you from having been to this site that if you just walk through the door frames, like you're walking through a wall about this thick. It's again that double stud construction with the dense packed cellulose in between. All those windows are triple glazed, and this is the south-facing side. So again, it's the same story, that passive solar design to let the summer sun in the wintertime, the sun in the wintertime. And actually, in the summertime, most of the sun is coming from a higher angle, so it doesn't penetrate as deep into the building. So you actually get this really good correspondence. In the winter, the sun is low, and it will shine straight in these windows and bring in what's called solar insolation, which is on the list of terms later. It's the amount of solar energy that's entering the building. So what mainly heats this building is the heat of the sun coming in the windows, plus the heat from all the appliances that are in use. So whenever you use anything, of course, it gives off heat. And the heat literally from the occupants. Every person inside a building represents a 100-watt heater. So when you insulate a building this well, you can actually make use of all of those heat sources. I want to talk about how you can make a chicken coop heat itself, right? Because every chicken is a 10-watt solar heater. It's kind of a fun thought. So that's how it's done. We went over that. It's very thick insulation, triple glazed windows, highly airtight. Just a building that airtight absolutely has to have a heat recovery ventilator. That's just kind of part of the package. So a ventilation system that brings in fresh air, exchanges it to the outside, and recovers the heat from it as it's doing that. So it preheats your incoming ventilation air. Simple shape. If you make the building a simple shape, then it's actually easier to insulate that well and keep the heat in, and the south-facing windows. And that was all about new construction. And it's obviously easier to design that in from the start, because you start from square one and you design it the way you want it. But it can also be done to a certain degree with pre-existing or older buildings. And this is a great example. A friend and I, actually the same Garth Hood of Thoughtful Dwellings, the same company that did that example in Fredericton that I gave, they've purchased this 100-year-old farmhouse near Gagetown, New Brunswick. And next year we're going to work on a project where we take this house and retrofit it, upgrade it to meet what's called the EnerFit passive house standard, which is a high efficiency energy standard for renovating houses. It's almost as much energy savings as the passive house new construction, but it's not quite as stringent. For obvious reasons. I mean, when you're starting with a building that's already been built, it's tougher. You have to peel everything back and kind of redesign to essentially get the walls thicker and all the air sealed and so on. But we're going to do it. to my knowledge, it'll be the first one in Atlantic Canada that will take an old house and make it this energy efficient. And we're going to make a documentary film about it, hopefully, to be able to show. Because I think it'll be quite an inspiring story.
I have a question
Yes.
in relation to that. Will it meet old world standards? Will it look the same when it's finished? And I ask because I work with Bruno's Coastal Action, and we're in Captain Angus Walter's house.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what we can do to upgrade it to be more energy efficient, but keep the UNESCO World Heritage standards that we're compelled to within the town of Woodburn.
Very important point. And yes, this building will look essentially the same on the outside when it's done. The walls themselves might actually be located further out than they were, but then to rebuild the same look. And if you have a sort of extreme case where you kind of can't do anything different to the outside, then it does present some limitations. You might have to build to the inside. In most of the heritage regulations I've seen, but I mean your situation might be different. It's almost entirely the exterior appearance that matters. So you can also build towards the inside to do those changes. It can be tricky to get high performance triple glazed windows that look period historical. So there can definitely be some really tricky parts to do it in a strict like heritage conservation district. So yeah, very, very good point. But this one's not a heritage property, so we don't have such stringent requirements, but it will look pretty much the same as it does now. Okay. Now, this section has been about our first way of using solar energy, heating the interior space. And I'll mention another way to do that, which some of you may have seen or seen installed, is this is a solar air heater. So this is on the side of the house in Halifax. And it's an insulated box with a black collector on the front of it and then a glazing on the front. So when the sun hits this, it gets very hot, like any enclosed dark surface. And what it has on the inside, there's a duct. There's two ducts, 4-inch duct down here and one there that go into the house. And then a fan on the inside, which it basically takes the air from the house, sends it through here where it gets heated up, and then it re-enters the house at the top duct. So this thing, when it's sunny, is just continuously putting hot air in when it's needed. There's also a thermostat on it, so if your house needs heat and it's sunny, the fan will come on and start bringing that hot air in. And it can make quite a significant contribution. The way I think of it is, it will essentially heat the room that's right behind it, unless you run ducts to other parts of the building from it. But one of these, which just for scale is about 3 feet by 7 feet, will typically heat about a 600 square foot room that's directly behind it. So the way this works is sort of modular. If you want to heat a different room on the south side, you could put another one over there or put several of them together.
We have one locally. At
Okay.
the Day Spring Fire Department, they've got one.
Great. Yeah. So this is a great technology in the sense that it's a fairly easy modular thing to add to an existing house. So, and also, I mean, you could design it into new construction as well, but it works particularly well in a retrofit situation. It doesn't require a whole bunch of rebuilding. It's very, very simple. And it works quite well. This particular model is a can solaire, which is made in Newfoundland, which is sort of a neat story. The black surface inside is made from reused pop cans, like aluminum cans, all stacked together with holes drilled through them and painted black. This really neat technology that they've developed. But there's also another good one made with a sort of more standard practice with a black sheet of aluminum and so on, called Solar Sheet out of Ontario. So there's two suppliers of quite good solar air heaters relatively close by.
There's some excellent do-it-yourselfers too on YouTube.
Oh yeah, and you can totally build this.
Yeah.
In fact, at the NSCC campus in Shelburne a couple of years ago, I was part of a team of people where we did this community project where people came together and built solar heaters.
Nice.
They just brought whatever they had, it was amazing, and built several of these along with some DIY solar water heaters and so on. Super fun. If you want a fun thing to do, have like a community solar build where you build something like this. Yeah.
Can one of those be put onto a roof if you don't have a wall, or would
Yeah.
that cause
Yeah.
too many problems?
Well, you can put it on a roof. it's a little bit more complicated because you want it at a significant angle. So if the roof is not all that steep, then you might want to tilt it up a bit, and then you need access to behind, either through the roof sheathing, or if they have to tilt them up, they usually build a little box behind them. I've seen several pictures of them put onto roofs. It will work. And good point about how it's positioned. You'll notice it's vertical. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but vertical is actually really good orientation for something that you only need to use in winter, like this. Because in winter, you think about how low the sun is, it's actually surprisingly low. So it's shining almost straight at this in winter. Whereas in summer, you're not going to use this anyway, it's just going to be shut off. So no point overheating it, but the sun is high anyway, so any rays are going to kind of glance off of it. So that's vertical orientation is great for winter heating solar appliances. Heating water. This is a laundry facility in this heritage hall. That's interesting. I think they are actually heritage property, but we got permission to build next to it. This is in Shelburne. And they do essentially run a workshop. It's kind of an assisted, like a employment training workshop, where business that they do is laundry, both for just private citizens and also for some of the bed and breakfasts in the area and so on. And they use obviously a lot of hot water, especially doing sheets and whatnot for a bed and breakfast, you have to use hot water. So they were heating all that water with propane, and we did this project where we designed a solar water heater for them. So these are solar water heater panels, and on the next slide we'll talk a bit about how they work. But basically what it is doing is dramatically reducing the amount of propane that they need to use to heat their water by heating it with the sun from these panels. And the reason that it's located on this little gazebo next to the building, besides the heritage aspect, is this direction these are facing is south. And south, here in the northern hemisphere where we are, is the direction to get the most solar energy. You look at the building, when I came down to do the solar assessment and they said, what can we do for solar here? Well, no part of this roof faces south. So what are we going to do? If you put them on here, they would do all right, but only one part of the day. The rest of the day would be shaded by the other side of the roof. So at the time, this gazebo wasn't here, but the little picnic table was. So I had an idea. I said to them, do you own that picnic area? And they did. And would your employees like maybe a picnic shelter? Because we need a south-facing roof. We need somewhere to put these things on. So that's what we did. And I like it. I like the way that it turned out.
Well, that's a great idea. Absolutely.
And of course, the fluid, the heated fluid that's being heated is going through two pipes in here. That's how it's coming back and forth to the building. And just on that point, to move fluid in this case, you do actually need a pump. And the pump in this particular system, which is a thermodynamic system, has this neat feature that the pump itself is run from a little photovoltaic electricity panel like this one. So that's right there. Which is neat because it's only going to run that pump when it's sunny, but when it's sunny is the only time that you actually want heat. So it's kind of a neat combination. No batteries, no anything, just straight to the pump with a little switch control. Okay, smaller system, well it's still 2 panels, so it's not that small. On a residential household in Halifax. And now it's a flat roof, so we built a stand to tilt them up some. That's a fairly extreme angle, so they're kind of more towards winter production because they've got extra in summer anyway. But how it works, there's a heat transfer fluid. I say fluid because it's not pure water because the fluid's going to be there in winter, even at nighttime where it could freeze. So it's got a non-toxic antifreeze in it. So that's pumped to the collectors and back using that solar-powered pump. The solar radiation heats the fluid, and then that heat, that fluid is pumped down to a heat exchanger, in this case in the basement in Utah, where that heat is transferred into the actual domestic hot water that they're going to use for their taps and showers. Now, just on that point, it's not a complete replacement for the water heater, for the electric or propane or whatever water heater, because there are going to be days when it's not sunny.
Sure.
And so basically what you do is you heat the solar storage tank and that becomes the supply for your regular heater. So when that water comes into the regular heater, on a sunny day it's already hot. So that day your regular heater doesn't have to come on. On other days maybe it will have to come on. The net effect of that on an annual basis is somewhere between 40 and 50% of your heating water energy is saved by the solar. And the last one, and I think, I'm doing all right for time, making electricity. And this is very much talked about. It's a really great way to use solar energy, but it's also the one that is, I would say, probably experiencing the most rapid growth right now. And that is using modules like these. And if you haven't handled a solar panel before, I'll leave it out. Feel free to handle it. But essentially, they're a bunch of crystalline solar cells. These are actually individual cells. Each one on its own would work as a little tiny electricity generator that you could run a little tiny light bulb or whatever from. But they're soldered together in series and put into a robust enclosure so that you can essentially produce more energy. And this is a small version. Those ones there, you can get a picture, sort of scale of how big they are. So they're about like this. And that's on at an individual household in Wolfville. Fairly new installation.
How many kilowatts is that?
That one there is just over 4 kilowatts.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And it's interesting, again, I'll summarize later what the sort of ideal conditions are for placing solar collection, but you kind of get the picture. These are facing south. They're on the ground because all the buildings in this area, the house and whatnot, all had trees shading them and so on. So we did this assessment, which is an important thing to do if you're going to get solar energy, is where can I put them that they're not going to be shading? And even at this, there's actually a couple of small saplings that are to this side, to the south side, and we told them up front, you are going to have to cut those down because they're
Or move them.
or trim them, or they can't stay where they are because they're going to get big and then they're going to cast shadows on here and they're going to cut your electricity consumption. Okay, there's another example. This one's actually on the Nova Scotia Community College campus at Waterfront campus in Dartmouth. And the idea is basically that converts sunlight, or the array converts sunlight directly into electricity. And that electricity goes through some power processing equipment, typically called an inverter. And that's just taking direct current from the panels and converting it to alternating current as a proper frequency and voltage to be able to connect it to your building and to the grid. And I'm talking about grid-connected systems, so systems where you actually have your solar panels connected to your normal household circuit panel. And through that, it's actually possible, if you have a surplus on a given day, meaning you're producing more than you're using that day, you can actually go out through the grid and feed other people's buildings, and you get a credit for that on your meter. Yeah.
That looks considerably less than 45 degrees. It should be about 55, shouldn't it?
It should. It's kind of a trick of the
It's
photo.
really the photo,
yeah.
okay.
It's actually pretty close to 45. And that's a good point. I'll get to that in a moment about the conditions of where they, because that's actually, I then went into these 3 concepts, which is one of your worksheet things, right? What are 3 concepts about this? So what we've had so far is the overview. That's how these 3 ways of using solar energy work. But what do you need to actually do that at your building? And these are 3 things. The first of which is you need particular conditions. And we've been talking about some of them along the way. Some place that faces pretty much close to south, and where you can put them where they won't be shaded. And this is a great example. These ones are on a fire station in Halifax. And so they're on the flat roof. And something you may know about Halifax streets is none of them actually go north or south. So you can see what, like, the building is facing the roof, or so the roof of the building is facing the street, but these panels are kind of on an angle so that they actually face south. And you'll see that these ones are tilted. To speak to the tilt question, they're nowhere near 45 degrees. They're closer to 30, even 25 degrees.
Yeah.
And the reasoning there is, if you look at it on an annual basis, so basically the flatter they are, when they're close to, say, 20 degrees, they're going to produce really well in summer, because the sun is high then, so it will be pretty much directly on them. But in winter, they're not going to produce so well. In winter, you would kind of want them to be tilted higher, so the sun is pointing straight at them, which is why some of the more complex arrays will actually change angle, either with the season or even day that follow the sun. But for simplicity, most arrays just stay in one fixed position. So if you want to pick a fixed position, you kind of just pick one where it'll maximize your annual electricity production if you connect to the grid. Because you can actually, in Nova Scotia with our net metering regulations, you can take your excess from the summer if you have it and get a credit for it against what you might not have enough in the winter. So what matters in that case is your total annual production versus your annual electricity bill. So basically what people will do is put them anywhere between about 25-30 and 45-50 degrees tilt and get above the same in annual production. The optimum is right around 40 for annual production for photovoltaics. The reason these are a little less than 40 is it keeps them down out of the wind. So they didn't have to secure them as much. These are not bolted to the roof. This is what's called a ballasted system.
Yeah.
So the whole rack is just weighted down there with bricks. So you, in that circumstance, probably don't want them up too high because of the wind loading on them.
How about snow? Because they get covered in snow very quickly.
They do get covered in snow.
If they're angled up, the snow all falls
Yeah,
off.
and it's exactly correct that they will get covered in snow, and the more you angle them up, the better off you're going to be in terms of shedding snow. To the point, I have a friend who has an off-grid home. I have several friends who have off-grid homes. But one of them chose, and this is Hans Albarda in Wolfville, chose to put his solar panels vertically on the wall.
Yeah.
And that way the snow never stays on them. And the interesting thing when you're off-grid is a very different scenario because you can't trade that power with the utility company. You need to supply all your own in winter as well as summer. And in winter, it's harder to produce as much. You don't have as much sunlight. So he's optimized his for winter by putting them vertical. And then in summer, it doesn't really matter that they're not optimal for summer because it's got plenty of sunshine in summer anyway. And then snow never stays on them. So he advocates if you're off-grid, just make them vertical. Then you never have to, sweep the snow off in the winter.
It would also depend where your load is too, if it's a summertime load or a wintertime load too.
That's right.
Because you're just mostly air conditioning, you got oil heat, and it's not a big, you might
Exactly.
want to go for the summer load and vice versa.
Yeah. So the angle you put them very much depends on which season that you want in production. Okay. So we've actually, I'm going to keep to the time, so we've actually been through most of this already, but just to summarize, you need a south-facing surface that you can put at a proper tilt angle. Shading, you want it not shaded with other buildings, trees, different kinds of structures for most of the day. It doesn't matter that much in the late afternoon and the early morning because by then the sun is pretty weak, sunlight is pretty weak anyway. And you need to have a load to use the energy. And that's the other thing that's important to think about. You're going to invest in infrastructure that will produce this solar energy. You need to use it for something to be able to benefit. And a great example of that is the solar water heater. What a solar water heater will do on a sunny day is produce for you a glorious full tank of solar heated water. If you don't use up that solar heated water within a couple of days, you've lost the benefit of it. So what that means is, for a solar water heater example, some place that uses a lot of hot water is a really good place for a solar water heater. So hotel, laundromat, car wash, anything that uses lots of hot water. At the household level, typically a household with at least 4 people in it who like to have hot showers is a good fit for a solar water heater. When you get to a household with a single person in it, or maybe just 2 people, and they're pretty conservation minded, they don't use that much hot water, to be honest, the return on the solar water heater is not going to be great, because you still have to pay for the solar water heater, but then you're not using it, because you don't use that much hot water. So that's a great example of what you need a load, right? You need somewhere to use that energy. With electricity, if you're connected to the grid through a net metering arrangement, you can essentially sell your surplus to Nova Scotia Power or to your local electric utility. So that kind of makes your load automatically, which is one of the reasons why grid-connected solar electricity is pretty appealing, because there's always a place to send a load to send it to. You can store it for later use. In the case of off-grid electricity, then you're putting it in your own batteries. If it's a solar water heater, then that's how big a solar storage tank do you have for that solar hot water. Solar hot air is kind of hard to store for later use. So you pretty much have to use it immediately. Yeah. The second concept, the last two, 2 and 3 here are that you need to make an upfront investment or someone has to finance that. It's typical of renewable energy projects. It's going to cost you X dollars, and then 0.3 over the next 25 or whatever years, you're going to save money. And that's an investment, basically. It's a way of making a return on investment. So you either have that money to put in up front, or you have somewhere to finance it to essentially get a loan, such as the clean energy financing mechanism that the town of Bridgewater has, for example. And since I'm almost out of time, I'll just very quickly go through that. As an example about this upfront investment, and I love this example, going back to that house in Fredericton, the passive house, that was new construction. It was done 2 years ago. They estimated that that type, size, and level of house with standard construction, if they had never done it as a passive house, they estimated it would have cost about $300,000 to build. And the actual construction cost when they made it all passive house and super efficient was $330,000. So their estimate was that it cost 10% extra to build. What was interesting is that, like a lot of home construction projects, it was financed through a loan. So there's a mortgage on the house and a loan for constructing it. The loan payments are obviously higher because it costs more to build. But the energy costs were lower by a greater amount than the mortgage costs were higher. So people are always asking about payback time, right? That's one of the questions you always get. The way that they financed this house, they were actually cash positive from day one, from the first month, compared with if they hadn't gone passive house. And that's because you can finance home construction over a 20-year or 25-year mortgage, right? So you can take that extra cost and spread it out to the point where your energy savings cover it. So they were very excited. They had this beautiful, comfortable house to live in, super energy efficient, and their actual monthly costs are just a tiny bit lower than if they had done nothing unusual at all, which I'm really excited about that example.
With that, was that $30,000 more, did they build the house themselves, or was that contractor's price? Like, was that just $30,000 more for the materials because they built it themselves, or?
It was the total cost, and they did, is an interesting hybrid because the people involved were contractors. So I don't actually know how they accounted for their time in that cost.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to raise that question as to what would it really cost if you just went to a contractor and did it, and it might be more. Definitely good point on that.
Yeah, 'cause it's pretty labor intensive.
It is. So for example, getting the
Especially
house
double
that
stud walls and stuff like that.
yeah, getting it that well sealed was quite labor intensive. And with a passive house, the trade-off that they make is they spend a lot more in the building envelope. So a lot more work to get it sealed so well, to build essentially much thicker walls. Triple glazed windows cost a lot more money. The savings part of that, no furnace. Right? Essentially, $10,000 heat pump or a furnace or whatever was not part of the picture because they didn't need it. Literally, they put an electric heating element the size of a toaster in the air ducts. So yeah, definitely it's good to check the numbers because they did have a bit of an advantageous position being contractors themselves.
Plus, over time, you'll see that type of construction be more competitively priced too as well, right?
It'll become more normal. Yeah, exactly. And then the returns, and just to give an example here, these numbers are rough. myself and everyone like wants to know actual numbers of how to do this, but the prices change all the time. In particular with solar PV, the prices generally tend to go downwards over time. But it's fairly reasonable, I think, to say you could invest $14,000 in a 5 kilowatt solar PV array. Could be a little more, could be a little less than that, depending how you get it. And it will produce an amount of electricity in a year that's worth about $850. So that's your return, basically. If you calculate that out, it'll do that for 25 years. Plus, if you're looking to save greenhouse gas emissions, it'll save about 3 tons of greenhouse gas emissions per year. The financial end of it is about a 6% annual rate of return for that 25 years. So that gives you a sense of what the return is on a solar PV, more or less, in 2016 prices. And it's up to each individual person, is that a good investment? It's not as lucrative an investment as a typical heat pump, for example. There are a lot of insulation projects that could be more lucrative investment. So, but it's in there. It's in the running in terms of reasonable investments, if you want to call it that.
That was grid connected?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, because it could be storage.
No.
Your battery investment was much higher, and replacement, that time period you
Yeah.
have to replace.
Yeah, good point. So your grid-connected systems do not need a battery bank, which keeps the cost a little bit lower, considerably lower. And then those batteries never need to be replaced because you don't have them. What's the payback period? And how do I get it? How do I get solar energy for my building? And I think I'm at a little past the limit of my time, so I'll just say we are going to share this presentation with you. And it just has some, really how much is it going to cost depends on the project. So you really have to crunch the numbers for every project. And again, what's the payback? It depends. Depends what you're doing, the cost, the prices, and so on. But the example I gave on the previous slide sort of gives you a rough idea. And then resources, Solar Nova Scotia, which I am on the board of directors of, I'll just say for a moment, is a nonprofit organization that includes a lot of members of the solar energy industry. And we actually have a directory of companies that do solar work. And that's a good resource to look at for places, people to talk to. The other thing, it's great to start with an energy assessment, because you might find that there are things that you can do in your building to improve energy efficiency along with a solar energy installation. And you could possibly bundle them all together and get a good outcome. So it's good to start with an assessment. And of course, you're welcome to contact me. My contact information is in all the worksheets, and it's also at the end of the presentation. We'll make a very, very brief plug for a new program that the Nova Scotia government is going to be launching in early 2017. It's called the Community Solar Program. And what it's going to do is give community groups, so nonprofit groups, municipalities, MIGMAL bands, etc. The college actually is allowed to do one, to propose to do a solar photovoltaic electricity array and sell the electricity with a contract, 20-year contract with Nova Scotia Power, at a price to be agreed on between the community group, the province, and the utility. And it's going to be, I think, a really interesting opportunity. So if you're part of groups that are in those categories or know people who might be interested in doing a solar electricity project on your building, this would be a way to do that beautiful project and make a reasonable return on it. Because the way the program is going to work is when you make your proposal as a community group, you put in your proposal what price you want for the electricity. And I mean, don't make it too high because it's going to go into a competitive process with all the other proposals, right?
Yeah.
But it gives you the chance, like if your group says, well, we need a 6% return on our investment, then you calculate the price accordingly as to what you propose to sell the electricity for per kilowatt hour. So if you want more information about that, feel free to talk to me about it. And I'm not going to go through this, but it's in the presentation. I listed sort of key terms in solar energy. So there's a whole bunch of them here, like a glossary, and those will be available. And resources as well, which I think are actually already some of these at the bottom of your worksheet. thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Garcia. Very informative session. We got some questions from the floor to you, and hopefully during our networking break, you will feel free to come up and talk to you at that time. Just in the interest of keeping the process going, we're going to break in a couple minutes for 20 minutes for networking, but prior to that, if we could perhaps just go around the room and have everybody just sort of introduce themselves to the group and what organization that you're representing today, and then we'll
I know it's sort of brand new, so you may not be able to answer this question, but do you have enough information about Elon Musk's solar roof to sort of compare how it's going to compare to solar panels, and is it the breakthrough that or the game changer that they're saying?
So the quickest answer is I don't have enough information.
I thought that might be the answer.
I've seen the pictures, like, I've seen the wow factor of solar roof tiles. I think it's a fantastic idea. And I've actually followed the evolution of solar roof tiles a little bit, because there are other versions of them that came out prior to that. And most of the ones I've seen so far have been significantly more expensive than normal solar modules. Sure. So a little bit hard to justify on essentially aesthetics alone, because the ones that I've seen so far don't have any higher production rating or efficiency. What's great about them is that they're part of the roof, right? They fit right into the roof. So my take would be, sort of until I see more evidence as to what they're going to cost and what their production efficiency is and so on, I'm going to assume that, like the other roof tiles I've seen, they're probably going to be more expensive than people really want to go for. And I can give you an example where I actually do have the numbers, and it's not the solar roof tiles, but the Tesla Powerwall, which is the battery that you can put on your wall. Wonderful product, like beautiful for making sort of the storage of energy accessible and small and compact and aesthetically pleasing. So it's a great marketing angle. But now this figure may be out of date, because I did it, I think, almost 2 years ago when they were earlier in their development. But at that time, I was doing an off-grid installation for a friend, and they said, well, what if we get a Tesla Powerwall? So I checked into the prices, and for the same capacity that they needed to store, the Tesla Powerwall was 3 times the cost of just ordinary solar lead-acid batteries, which are perfectly fine for an off-grid solar project, and have the added benefit of actually being made in Nova Scotia, because we have one of the best lead-acid battery manufacturers in the world, actually in Nova Scotia, Siret Battery, which is in Spring Hill, which actually they sell mostly under the brand name Rolls, but they're some of the most robust batteries for this application in the world, and at the time cost a third of what the solar Powerwall would cost. So I think the cost factor is important to consider, but what I really appreciate about the work of Tesla is the way that they kind of popularize everything, right? Things make the news when they're launched by Tesla, which is really important part of the whole picture change. That's my take on it.
It'll be interesting, because their claim is it's going to cost less than a shingle roof. Now, I assume that's a fairly high-end shingle roof, but
yeah.
if it's even close, that's quite a number.
Yeah, and if they are able to eliminate that shingling cost, that's great, and that would represent a real advance, because again, the earlier versions of roof tiles that I was looking at, you actually still had to put
A shingle roof underneath.
you had to put not necessarily shingle, but you had to put a waterproof system underneath it. So you were only increasing the cost, not cutting a shingling cost. So if they managed that could really help a lot. There was here in the, there it is. Okay.
No, I just wanted to, we've got a solar system, domestic, which we've had for almost 15 years.
Yeah.
And one of the caveats is maintenance on the pump and the fluid, and that's, an expense that you need to figure into that. I don't know if the newer systems are better, but that's one of the things that we're looking into for the winery is how much extra are we going to have to figure in for that, because we've had to pump apart and up to the manufacturer several times.
Are you considering a solar heater for water for the winery?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to guess is, depending how much hot water you use, probably still a good investment. And the fundamentals of a solar water heating system still include a pump and the fluid solution. So you still need to maintain that part and check the fluid level and occasionally change the fluid.
Yeah.
So you definitely would still have to account for that. The reliability of the pumps has increased quite a bit, so that's a good thing. But it's definitely, yeah, it definitely has to be still taken into account.
I kind of reflect on this with respect to computing. Computing, we had a concept called Moore's laws, which was essentially said every 18 months, the computing you got per dollar doubled. And is that what's happening here? These things are getting better, the conversion of energy is getting better, the local storage is getting better, and that we're hitting a tipping point where this really starts to make a lot more economic sense, of the economics of it continue to improve. And is there a relationship to that improvement over time that's kind of consistent with something like more law?
Fairly consistent, and especially in solar electricity, in the photovoltaic.
Yeah.
And what the biggest thing that has happened is a dramatic and fairly well-defined drop in the prices of solar modules. And that is continued for more than 10 years now. It's been following this dropping pattern. And that's very encouraging. The other parts of the system haven't dropped quite as rapidly, but they're dropping a bit as well. When you put together a photovoltaic array, you need the modules, and the prices of which is these, and the prices of those have dropped so much that they're actually no longer the biggest single cost
of your project.
The last two projects that I've done, including this one in Wolfville that I had pictures of, the inverters actually cost more than the modules, which is kind of interesting. So the U.S. government is engaged in what they call their Sunshot program. Well, whether they'll continue to do so. They have engaged in the Sunshot program, which the goal of it is to get the cost of installing solar photovoltaic systems, total cost, down to below $1 per watt installed in the United States. So for those folks who are not as familiar with the solar electricity world, the costs are usually quoted in dollars per watt. So if I say I've got a 4 kilowatt system, that's 4,000 watts, and the installed cost was $2 a watt, that means it cost me $8,000 to put that 4 kilowatt system in. Costs in Canada, in Nova Scotia right now, depending on the size of your system and who installs it, are basically running, from my estimation, people can correct me if they have different costs, but I've seen cost figures for systems anywhere from about $2.80 a watt up to $3.20 a watt, kind of in that range. There may be some higher and some lower.
But you're talking total
system cost, yeah.
That sounds low to me. We installed some systems and we usually run closer to 4.
Okay.
4 and a bit, yeah.
I got a quote for a 20 kilowatt system at $3.20 a watt. And yeah, there's definitely a wide range. There were even some systems like that one on the fire hall, installed a couple of that I showed on the Halifax fire hall, that was bid and awarded the contract at $2.60 a watt. Now, maybe that company took a loss on it because they were trying to get drum up business, but anyway, to put that in context, the U.S. government has had a goal of making it $1 a watt. And it's not the price of the modules that they're trying to reduce, because that's already been reduced so dramatically and is on its own curve. But it's the price of the inverters, the racking, the paperwork, the whole thing, trying to drop down.
And is that storage as well?
No.
Or just grid?
No, just grid connected.
Grid connected.
I'm being told that we're on time for questions, but there's probably more opportunity, right, for break.
So at this part of the day, we're going to have a 20-minute or so, we might shorten it slightly, maybe to 15 networking break. So please take the time to chat with other people in the room. Wayne is around. We'll turn the lights on. NSCC has kindly provided coffee and refreshments for us today. This is NSCC's contribution to the Energy Partnership, so thanks to NSCC. And maybe one thing that I just wanted to point out as well is that we do have a wealth of experience in this room on solar energy. We have a number of suppliers and people with their own experience with it. We also have a number of institutional organizations in this community and businesses that have solar systems installed, right? So there's quite a range of experience just here, and part of what Energize Bridgewater is about telling the story of those things that people have gone and trailblazed and put in place in our community and make that a popular concept, much like Elon Musk is doing with the industry in general. So we're going to take a 15-minute break. Thank you all for joining us, and maybe one more round of applause for Dr.